Tell me some of the albums that didn't quite make the list.
Yeah, again, it was really tough. One was Venom, Black Metal. I mean,
that's
a classic right there. And you, of course, from the 80s, so you love that. Wasp, The Headless Children, Mastodon's Leviathan. We listened to something off that in our live podcast. The Agonists, their first album, Once Only Imagined. Halloween, Keeper of the Seven Keys. Man, that might have been the last one out. And then Metal Church, Blessing in Disguise. Oh, a monster right there. It still didn't make the cut.
Yeah, I considered the Halloween album, back for its time, it was very progressive, but it was not one that I had really kind of gotten into and listened to over and over again. Mine was pretty much anything AC/DC, of course. Priest Screaming for Vengeance, The Cult's Electric. You know, I went back and forth with Into Eternity. I wanted to put 2 on there. Dead or Dreaming didn't quite make the list. And then Crocus is One Vice at a Time, and then finally Metallica Ride the Lightning. All of them, of course, classic, well, except for one, classic 80s metal.
So why don't you start us off, Brian? Why don't you start off with your list counting down from 20?
Okay, starting at number 20, I went back and forth on this. I had Into Eternity with Buried in Oblivion. At number 19, I had Sepultura of Chaos AD. And that album, in particular, that song is just, man, you talk about song. You know, I've talked a lot about this on the podcast, just grabbing you and taking you with. That album, that song is great. Black Sabbath, Master of Reality. And then Dangerous Toys, obviously, from where Sport and Woody came from. And then Van Halen, the first Van Halen. One of the best first albums of all time. Coming in at number 15, Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction. I remember when this album came out, it took the country by storm. If you look at it musically, the talent that's involved in playing and producing this album, it's one of the best ever, I think. It went very quickly downhill from there, but for this one moment in time, it's a great album. The song came off my next album, number 14, Def Leppard, On Through the Night. I picked this album because it is such a great initial album. I mean, I don't know of any band that's come out with an album that's as rocking and as good as this album is, as far as metal, especially 80s metal, as metal goes. Here again, it illustrates how artists grow in their talent and in their ability and go extremely downhill, if you ask me. Scorpions' Animal Magnetism, one of their most underappreciated albums with some of the greatest songs. The Zoo is a classic off this album. At number 12, coming in, I know it's one of your favorites, Stryper, Soldiers Under Command. I'll just say, I don't care if it's a Christian album. This is a freaking rocking album. Those guys can play, they can sing, they can belt it out, and they can put on a great show. Then we come to Metallica, Master of Puppets. I don't know how any top 20 metal album countdown cannot have this album on it. It's the quintessential 80s metal album. Okay, now this is interesting because of all the bands that you could bitch about not being metal, my number 10 choice is probably the closest I've come to agreeing with you. It's Triumph, a band out of Canada, with their Allied Forces album, an extremely great album. Every song on that album is just chock full of talent and some rocking and some great guitar playing, and that's a lot of why I choose that album, because there's so much good guitar playing on it. I love Rick Emmett. Number 9, I'm sure it's an album that you love, but it's actually one of my favorite albums of all time, and that's Practice What You Preach. Man, what can I say about this album that I haven't already said? It just grabs you by the balls and yanks as hard as it can and says, you rock or I'm taking these with me. And I have to admit that I rocked a little bit. Number 8 was Quiet Riot, Metal Health album. I picked this album because it was one of my intros to heavy metal. I listened to this album. I could sing you this album to this day, pretty much. It's one of the ones that got me into the genre. It's one of the ones that kept me and grabbed my attention. Carlos Cavazo, Kevin DeBrogue. This is a great album. Like I said, it's what got me there. It's what kept me there in metal. I wouldn't be listening to Into Eternity if it hadn't been for the band Quiet Riot. At number 7, one of the classic metal albums of all times, a band that we have in common on the top 20 list, but not the album, is Balls to the Wall. There are so many good tracks. I can remember being in my college dorm room and sticking my speakers in the window and playing balls to the wall over the courtyard at Hagen Hall. And the RA, the head RA of the whole building came and said, "Turn that down." And I thought, I have arrived with true metal. And then, of course, the classic album, Pantera's Cowboys from Hell. Every song in this album is great. This is a song that I just used to listen to this is an album that I used to listen to over and over and over again. And the thing about 10 through 5 for me, or 10 through 6, it meets the criteria of, is it an album that I listen to all the way through and can actually say that I love the album, and all of these meet that criteria. Number 5, Metallica, Kill 'Em All. This was my introduction to thrash, death, speed, metalcore, whatever the hell you want to put on it. It was freaking phenomenal. And I actually didn't hear Metallica play their song. I heard the song Motor Breath in a little bitty pub, BJ's Newsstand in Lexington, Kentucky, and the lead guitar player played this, the band played this song, and the lead guitar player had barbed wire around his boots, and he ran out into the middle of the road playing the guitar with a remote. It was freaking awesome, and that kind of got me into this. It's just a great album. It's a debut that is not to be forgotten. Back in Black, I'll never forget the day that Jason Dunn said, "Hey man, check this out," and my life has not been the same since. There's not a single song on this album that I can't sing word for word the entire way through. It just became, back when I was in college, my second year in college, this album was the only thing that could be heard playing coming out of my dorm room for a lot of days. Matter of fact, I got people pissed at me because I played it too much. They can all go suck it because it was awesome. Ozzy Osbourne, Blizzard of Oz. You know, when he left Black Sabbath and he was having trouble and nobody thought he was going to come back, this was the basic Kiss My Ass, I'm Back album. And you got Randy Rhoads playing guitar, and that's all you need to say about that album. Now, Judas Priest, British Steel. I have a memory associated with this album, and it's of a little church girl named Michelle C., who was the sweetest, most innocent little thing. One night at a Sunday school party, you and I both put this album on, and there was some head-banging shit going on, and all these little church folks could not help but be caught up in the jam. And it was the most fun, most hilarious thing I think I've ever seen. Yeah. And then the quintessential, the ultimate heavy metal, roots of heavy metal. It had it all. Rockin', head-banging. You know, you're not going to find anybody that head-bangs better than Angus Young. And this song, this entire album, it's nostalgic and it's modern. It sounds like the songs that they play today. AC/DC, one of the reasons why I love them is they're one of the few bands that can play the same thing over and over and over again. It doesn't matter whether it's metal from the 80s or metal from the 210s. It sounds awesome, and people enjoy it. And they have been a big influence for a lot of bands, regardless of what those bands label them. For me, this was heavy metal. So let's look at your bottom 5, if you will, 20 through 16. What'd you have?
That's right. I start off at number 20 with Accept, the Breaker album. Accept breaks out in this precursor to Restless and Wild. You've got classic tracks like Son of a Bitch, Breaker, Burning. To me, Udo's in top form here. Wolf Hoffman, he's churning out the riffs. I would critique oftentimes, you know, your interest in 80s metal, but if all 80s metal were like Breaker, I would be on board with you, man. It's awesome.
Yeah.
At 19, I've got Prison of Desire by After Forever. It's the debut album from that Dutch band, named for the Black Sabbath track After Forever, of course.
Yeah.
Floor Jansen and Mark Jansen, they deliver stunning vocal performances, awakening the world to the majesty of symphonic death metal opera.
Hang on, I'm about to throw up with all that crap. Go ahead, next album.
I'm not done, dude.
I know. Said next album.
No, I'm not done talking about Prison of Desire, dude.
I know. I'm trying to get you past it, but go ahead.
Following the Cry, Leaden Legacy, Torturous Threatening, Black Tomb, The Embrace That Smothers begins. I am literally haunted by this album. Have you thrown up yet?
Well, I think it's great that you could name all those things. I actually had to look up the name of the Dangerous Toys album because I couldn't remember it. So that gives you a little clue about how different we look at music.
That was tough. You forgot the name of the Dangerous Toys album?
I had no freaking clue.
Were you surprised when you found out the name?
It was a great break in the day, I have to say that.
At number 18, we go literally as low as you can go. I remember buying this CD, putting it in to play in my CD player, and being absolutely blown away. I mean, track after track literally hammering me into the ground. I mean, you've got the classic Testament sound, but then guitarist James Murphy of Death and drummer John Tempesta, they just took it to another level. Testament has soared to great heights, but in my opinion, their best effort was their lowest.
It was a good pick. I actually went back and forth for a Testament album because I wanted to put one on there. This was my second choice Testament.
At 17, I have, what was it? Oh, yes, I remember now. This Orwellian masterpiece, Queensryche Operation Mindcrime, the concept album. Queensryche never sounded better. You go through all the tracks, Needle Eyes, Speak, Revolution Calling, their outstanding twin guitar attack, incredible atmospherics, and Brian, there's even a female vocalist on Sweet Sister Mary. I know you love that.
I do love that. You know, I don't. We'll talk about that later. There, you pushing me unfairly there. But I will say this: Mindcrime is the consummate concept album. I love this album. Great pick.
And I've got 4 concept albums on my list. No, I don't think that's any coincidence. And, you know, this album, it's truly the queen of the Reich's catalog in my mind.
It's very good.
At 16, Epica's Divine Conspiracy. Mark Jansen does it again, this time with Simone Simmons, her angelic voice soaring over his demonic growls. The Obsessive Devotion, Sancta Terra, Chasing the Dragon. And Mark brings to finale his Embrace That Smothers theme, begun on the Prison of Desire album.
I'm not as excited about that as you seem to be. You know, I listened to this album a little bit when you put it on there. I appreciate the talent. It's just not my style, man.
My number 15 is the Symbolic album by Death. At the height of their power, Death delivers a stunning symbolic vision of death metal. Songs like A Thousand Eyes, Crystal Mountain, Empty Words, Zero Tolerance. Gene Hoglan's drumming is outstanding. Chuck Schuldiner's growls, they are spot on. This is the penultimate Death album. At 14, continuing his collaboration with Roy Z, it's Bruce Dickinson, Accident of Birth. Dickinson harnesses fellow Maidener Adrian Smith. This eclipses his other solo works. A monster of an album, Freak, Road to Hell, Man of Sorrows, Accident of Birth. Brian, there's no accident here. It's just pure metal. At number 13, we ask, could it be that evil has heroes? The answer, Brian, is yes. Dio's Magica, an amazing concept album, part sci-fi fantasy, part Dungeons & Dragons campaign. The Magica story pits good versus evil, with songs like Fever Dreams, Turn to Stone, Marry the Devil's Daughter. And at the end, Dio himself narrates the whole thing in masterful fashion, weaving a tale that leaves the listener literally spellbound.
Dude, that's one of the things that I love about Dio was his imagination and storytelling ability in his songs, paralleled by none. He is so good at it.
At 12, Opeth's Blackwater Park. Feels like a concept album, but it isn't. Opeth skillfully plays with the listener, then vanquishes them to the hellish despair of outer darkness. Songs like Bleak, The Funeral Portrait, Leper Affinity. Progressive melodic death metal has never heard so good.
So they do actually play metal on that album. Is that what you're telling me? It's not just all classical guitar and piano?
And then at number 11, Fight's War of Words. Arguably superior to any of his solo efforts, Halford and his priestly brother Scott Travis nail the listener with this unexpected sonic attack. Into the Pit, Nailed to the Gun, Immortal Sin, Laid to Rest. Judas Priest meets Pantera, and the fight is on. At 10, Camelot, The Black Halo. This is the newest entry on my list. I only first heard it a year ago but it explodes up to number 10. A symphonic metal marvel, Camelot Best Epica with a divinely demonic follow-up concept album, amazing singing by Roy Khan, brilliant guitars from Thomas Youngblood, and includes guest vocals from Epica's Simone Simmons and Dimmu Borgir's Shagrath. Impeccable keyboards, brilliant songwriting, Black Halo rocks. At number 9, Forbidden, Twisted into Form. My vote for the best, least known metal band ever is Forbidden, and this is their opus. Step by Step, Tossed Away, Out of Body, we listened to One Foot in Hell. Paul Bostoff from Slayer and Testament, his drumming is phenomenal. I would argue Forbidden may be the greatest thrash band ever, and this album, in my mind, is one of the greatest metal offerings of all time. Then at number 8, Into Eternity, Buried in Oblivion. Much like Forbidden, Into Eternity, a band that's never been properly recognized for their incredible musicianship and their contribution to metal. Tim Roth, Chris Krull, Rob Doherty, those are metal gods. Three-dimensional Aperture, Beginning of the End, Splintered Vision, Spiraling into Depression. This is a masterwork of metal. At number 7, The Story of Evil in 3 syllables, Abigail. King Diamond leaves no room for the squeamish. Demonic stillborn fetuses take center stage in this album. Family Ghost, Mansion in Darkness, Omen, Seventh Day of July 1777. Andy LaRouche, he is incredible. He's just shreds. King screams, shrieks, wails, growls. It's almost supernatural. And then at number 6, Iced Earth, Something Wicked This Way Comes. A brilliant album. And then you get to the final 3 songs, the Something Wicked trilogy, the story of Set Abominee. These concepts will then serve to invoke 2 more entire albums. John Schaefer, he's a master of the riffs. They've never sounded better than on here. Savior to My Own, Devil to Some, Mankind Falls, Something Wicked Comes. There's a demon pointing at me. He's saying don't do it. He's saying don't break the oath. Merciful fates, don't break the oath. The king summons me. He summons me to come to the Sabbath for a dangerous meeting. He wants me to be part of the desecration of souls. I will say the words, Brian, and I swear I won't break the oath. The next one, Slayer, Hell Awaits. From the beginning chance of Join Us, through the thundering, speedy riffs, this album has a majesty and brilliance few others can match. Songs like Kill Again, At Dawn They Sleep, Hardening of the Arteries, Praise of Death. The twin leads are freaking insane. Kerry King, the late Jeff Hanneman, they trade devastating solos throughout. This is a masterwork.
I agree, definitely.
I can only respond to Slayer by saying, yes, I will join you because hell does await.
Man.
At number 3, let him who hath understanding reckon the number of this beast of a metal album. Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast, the first Maiden album with Dickinson behind the mic, and it was colossal. Children of the Damned, Hallowed Be Thy Name, Run to the Hills, The Prisoner, 22 Acacia Avenue, song after song. This album had my number for certain, Brian.
I am not a number, I am a free man.
Then at number 2, now I couldn't argue with someone who would put this at the top as number 1. Paranoid by Black Sabbath, the title track, War Pigs, Iron Man, Ferris Wear Boots, Electric Funeral. I mean, there's just massive guitars, massive riffs, massive metal. Iommi is at his best here. Satan laughing spreads his wings.
Doesn't he, though?
And then at number 1, I picked the 12th album produced by a band who at that time were entering their 3rd decade together, Judas Priest, Painkiller. The title song provides perhaps the ultimate metal vision. A Savior comes down from the skies, but this is no Christ. Instead, a Messiah of steel fit for our worship. Every track is incredible. Hell Patrol, Metal Meltdown, Touch of Evil, Leather Rebel, Between the Hammer and the Anvil, and on and on. I mean, in some ways, this album it's so basic and stripped down. The guitars, they sound live, raw. They're at the right place in that mix without sounding overproduced. And Scott Travis, his drumming, drives the band with such a strength of percussion and power that really Priest hadn't seen for over a decade since they'd had Les Binks. If I could only choose one metal album, Brian, this would be the one.